India has emerged as a global powerhouse, both economically and militarily, in 2025. With a booming economy, a rapidly growing defense sector, and strategic alliances, India's influence is stronger than ever. However, not everyone sees this rise positively. Some countries fear India's expanding military strength, technological advancements, and geopolitical strategies. Whether it's due to border tensions, economic competition, or India's growing global influence, these nations are increasingly concerned about India's power. In this video, we'll explore the top 10 countries that fear India in 2025, analyzing the reasons behind their concerns and how India's rise is reshaping global politics. Stay tuned as we uncover the truth behind India's growing dominance on the world stage. 10. North Korea, India's support for global sanctions and military strength. North Korea has always been wary of powerful nations opposing its nuclear ambitions, and India is one of them. In 2025, India has actively supported global sanctions against North Korea, aligning itself with international efforts to contain Pyongyang's nuclear program. Additionally, India's advanced missile and space technology has surpassed North Korea's capabilities, making it harder for Pyongyang to compete on the global stage. India's strong relations with South Korea and the United States further threaten North Korea's diplomatic position. With India emerging as a major player in global security and nuclear deterrence, North Korea fears losing its ability to negotiate from a position of strength. If India continues to align itself with Western powers and regional allies, North Korea's isolation will only deepen, making it more vulnerable to economic and military pressures. 9. Indonesia, India's expanding military presence in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, the largest economy in Southeast Asia, has always played a key role in regional politics. However, in 2025, India's growing military and economic influence in the Indo-Pacific is causing concern in Jakarta. India has strengthened defense and trade ties with ASEAN nations like Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia, positioning itself as a dominant power in the region. This has reduced Indonesia's strategic importance and shifted the balance of power. Additionally, India's advanced naval capabilities and increasing military drills in the region challenge Indonesia's dominance in the Malacca Strait, a key trade route. With India expanding its diplomatic and defense presence in Southeast Asia, Indonesia fears that its influence will decline, forcing it to compete with India for regional leadership. If India continues its aggressive expansion, Indonesia may struggle to maintain its historical role as a leader in ASEAN affairs. 8. Sri Lanka, India's growing regional influence. Sri Lanka has historically balanced its relations between India and China, but in 2025, India's influence is growing rapidly, causing concerns in Colombo. India has provided financial aid, infrastructure projects, and security cooperation, making Sri Lanka more dependent on New Delhi. This shift has come at the expense of China's Belt and Road Initiative investments, which India has actively countered by offering better trade deals and diplomatic support. Sri Lanka now fears that its economic dependence on India might restrict its sovereignty, especially in matters related to port development and maritime security. Additionally, India has increased its naval presence in the Indian Ocean, further limiting Sri Lanka's strategic choices. With India growing stronger as a regional power, Sri Lanka worries about being forced into decisions that align with India's interests, making it harder to maintain its traditional diplomatic balancing act. 7. Russia, India's shift towards Western allies. For decades, Russia and India shared a strong defense and economic partnership, with Russia supplying India with military equipment and energy resources. However, in 2025, things have changed significantly. India has diversified its defense imports, increasing purchases from France, the United States, and Israel, reducing its reliance on Russian weaponry. The Russia-Ukraine war has further strained relations, as India has taken a neutral stance, focusing instead on self-reliance in defense production through its Make in India initiative. Additionally, India is strengthening trade and military partnerships with Western nations, diminishing Russia's traditional role as India's primary ally. The biggest concern for Russia is that India is becoming economically and militarily independent, making Russian influence weaker than ever before. As India forges new strategic partnerships in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, Russia fears losing one of its most important allies, impacting its geopolitical standing. 6. Australia, India's naval dominance in the Indo-Pacific. India's expanding naval capabilities have significantly shifted power dynamics in the Indo-Pacific, leaving Australia in an uncertain position. While Australia and India are both part of the Quad alliance, India's dominance in maritime security, trade routes, and military technology is now overshadowing Australia's role in the region. India has strengthened its naval bases, missile defense systems, and aircraft carriers, securing key strategic positions in the Indian Ocean and South Pacific. Australia's fear stems from India's increasing control over critical trade routes, which directly impact Australia's economy. Additionally, India's closer defense ties with Japan and the US have strengthened its influence over regional security, pushing Australia into a secondary role. With China and India competing for dominance, Australia is now forced to navigate a complex geopolitical landscape where India holds the upper hand in military and economic strength. 5. United Kingdom, India's economic supremacy and diplomatic power. The United Kingdom now fears India's rapidly growing economic power as it surpasses the UK in GDP, technology, and global trade dominance. Once a former colony, India is now setting the terms in trade negotiations, forcing the UK into a weaker diplomatic position. British companies heavily depend on the Indian market, making economic stability reliant on maintaining strong ties with India. Additionally, India has demanded reparations for colonial exploitation, increasing tensions between the two nations. The UK's historical involvement in anti-India separatist movements and support for Khalistani activists have further worsened relations. The UK also fears losing its Indian workforce due to India's rapid growth in tech and innovation, reducing reliance on British companies. As India cements its position as a global superpower, the UK fears losing its historical influence over India, marking a complete reversal of colonial-era dynamics. 4. Turkey, India's growing influence in the Muslim world. Turkey's consistent anti-India rhetoric on Kashmir and Muslim rights has led to strained relations. However, in 2025, India's diplomatic victories in the Middle East have sidelined Turkey's influence in the region. India's stronger trade ties with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt have weakened Turkey's standing in the Islamic world. Moreover, India's strategic partnership with Israel, one of Turkey's rivals, has further complicated the situation. India's defense advancements, including drone technology and counter-terror operations, have alarmed Turkey, as these innovations could disrupt its own regional ambitions. Economically, Turkey's deteriorating economy and strained international relations make it reliant on trade, and losing the Indian market would be a significant blow. As India strengthens its global leadership position, Turkey now fears being pushed into diplomatic isolation, reducing its influence on international platforms. 3. Canada, diplomatic fallout and Khalistan issue. India's relationship with Canada has deteriorated significantly in 2025 due to Canada's alleged support for pro-Khalistan groups. India has taken a strong stance against separatist activities, accusing Canada of harboring extremists who threaten India's national security. In response, India has imposed trade restrictions, suspended diplomatic ties, and refused to engage in bilateral agreements with Canada. The economic impact of this fallout has been severe for Canada, as Indian investments and skilled workers contribute significantly to its economy. Additionally, Canada is now facing international pressure due to India's rising global influence, making it harder to take an anti-India position without consequences. India's ability to mobilize its diaspora to counter separatist movements has further put Canada in a difficult position. With India growing stronger both economically and diplomatically, Canada fears long-term economic and political setbacks if relations continue to decline. 2. Pakistan, military superiority and diplomatic isolation. Pakistan has always feared India's military and economic strength, but in 2025, this fear has reached new levels. India's defense budget is nearly 6 times larger than Pakistan's, allowing it to invest in cutting-edge missile technology, advanced fighter jets, and nuclear deterrence systems. While Pakistan faces economic turmoil, inflation, and international loan dependencies, India is experiencing rapid economic growth, strengthening its influence globally. India's diplomatic success in isolating Pakistan by convincing nations to take strict actions against terrorism has further weakened Islamabad's position. Even traditional allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have prioritized trade and investment with India over Pakistan. With India expanding its military bases in the Indian Ocean and enhancing border surveillance, Pakistan now faces an unmatched military and economic competitor. The possibility of India conducting surgical strikes or cyber warfare operations has further increased Pakistan's fears, forcing it into a defensive stance. 1. China, military rivalry and economic competition. China has always viewed India as a regional competitor, but in 2025, this rivalry has intensified. India's rapid military modernization, including advanced missile systems, aircraft carriers, and AI-driven warfare, has forced China to reconsider its dominance in Asia. India's growing presence in the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea through naval alliances with Japan, Australia, and the United States has alarmed Beijing. Additionally, India's boycott of Chinese products and its push for self-reliance in manufacturing have significantly impacted China's economy. On the border, India has constructed high-altitude military bases and developed hypersonic missiles, further complicating China's strategic calculations. India's deepening ties with Taiwan and the Quad Alliance pose a direct challenge to China's geopolitical ambitions. With India rising as an economic and technological powerhouse, China fears losing its grip over Asia. If current trends continue, India may soon surpass China in several strategic sectors, shifting global power dynamics.